Obviously, sometimes there are some issues we have to deal with, and you were telling me, and of course we've talked about what's going on with the Louisiana flood insurance, or the flood insurance around the nation. Why don't you give us some background about that issue, and then talk to us about, say, what the Louisiana Realtors is doing.
Sure, I'd be happy to give you a little background, as everyone may or may not be familiar, that the flood insurance program was created in 1968 due to the fact that the private market kind of stepped aside and stopped writing in that market. So the federal National Flood Insurance Program was created back in 1968. It's been a great program for individuals to be able to pay in for premiums to be able to obtain coverage in the case of flood to their properties, residential and commercially. Well, over the past 4 or 5 years, the program, according to FEMA, has been in the deficit. And as you know, sometimes it's been 6 months and it's been stopped. It's been stopgap extended for maybe 3 or 4 months. There was no certainty that the program would continue long term. So the Louisiana Realtors and others around the country, the stakeholders involved last year, we supported the 5-year extension in the so-called Biggert-Waters Flood Insurance Act of 2012, realizing that premiums may tick up a little bit, but certainly not to the level that we're seeing with the ramifications of actually seeing the law being implemented. So certainly we support certainty in the market. We supported the 5-year extension, but obviously with the implementation, and as I like to call it, the devil's in the details of how the law will be implemented, there's been some unintended consequences in mainly the form of skyrocketing premiums on the residential side, particularly, that consumers in no way are going to be able to afford in order to purchase flood insurance moving forward. The Louisiana Realtors has been heavily engaged with a broad national coalition that's obviously being spearheaded by Greater New Orleans Inc. In New Orleans, of all types of stakeholders involved that are dealing, whether it's banks, realtors, title insurance companies, you name, you run local elected officials, people in communities and cities are all very concerned about what we've seen in the implementation phase of the Biggert-Waters Act. We are seeing potential premiums where individuals may be paying $600 or $700 now to cover their home. In some cases, these premiums may be rising to $6,000, $7,000 in order to be able to keep that flood insurance.
So that's just for the flood insurance, am I correct?
That is correct. We're talking about just flood insurance. You know, not on, as we all know, property insurance in certain areas, depending on where you live, is obviously a challenge for many people as well. But we're strictly talking about an individual. And keep in mind, if there's a federal loan involved with this property and a mortgage on the property, those banks are required by federal law to require that consumer keep flood insurance in play on that property. So a consumer is, in many places, they're stuck now because they're faced with the idea of having to come up with $7,000, $8,000 a year that they shall pay to keep the flood insurance in order to keep their mortgage in effect and going forward.